We're here this great day to talk about the integrity of Maryland elections. And we've seen very timely information in all of the major media from both the right and the left and the broad stream media talking about American elections and the faults that an independent Pew report has found in them. For example, the New York Times, their title is "Voter Rolls Are Rife with Inaccuracies." CBS News, "Voter rolls deeply flawed." Sad to report, even Al Jazeera says 1 in 8 voters are voting fraudulently in America. I want to bring to your attention a few statistics. 24 million registrants in America are not valid. 2 million dead people in America are still on the rolls, and some of them vote. These are facts, ladies and gentlemen. This is something that the Pew report has been able to quantify and validate. Just a few weeks ago, after the Florida primary, a reporter in Florida on ABC News was able to determine that over 100 illegal aliens voted in their election. Now, some may say 100 illegal aliens voting in the election is not a big deal, but they found that data by comparing it against folks who were called for jury duty. And when they got called for jury duty, they said, "Oh, we can't vote. We're not American citizens. We're illegal immigrants." So they took the data from jury recusal names, cross-checked it against who voted. So they were able to find 100 of those people. Some people aren't called for jury duty ever in their life. Maybe once every 10 years. 100 folks in Florida were found to be illegal immigrants who cast ballots in Florida elections. Here in Maryland, we have the same problem. Information. My bill will require that when you go to vote, you take with you a valid government-issued photo ID, so as to not inhibit someone who does not have the dollars to afford a Maryland ID. You'll also be able to bring your voter registration card or the specimen ballot that is mailed to each and every registered voter's home right before the election. It's required by law. So there's no additional expense for the government. There's no additional expense for low-income Marylanders. If you do not have a photo ID, all you have to do is bring that voter registration card or the specimen ballot. And even if you forget, you can still vote by provisional ballot that's later checked by the Board of Elections to make sure that you voted, you're alive, and you only voted once. So this is all about ensuring that you, the American citizen, have the full rights granted to you by our Constitution to have your vote counted. We have reports of people around Maryland who went to vote in the last election, and someone else already voted. I have family members who came to me and said, "Nick, Delegate Kipke, someone voted, and I had to vote by provisional ballot." I thought it was a once-in-a-million instance where this has happened. But since we've introduced these bills, we've heard from thousands of Marylanders expressing the same problem. The need to fix this problem is urgent, and it must be done now.
Is the easiest way to deal with it right now. It's, like he said, cheap, it's inexpensive. All you gotta do is have ID when you go show up to vote. You know, when you go to vote, you stand there at the registration table and the registrant asks you what your name is. You tell them. They say, "What's your address?" Tell them the address. That's it. And you go vote. And I think it's kind of ridiculous. That's all you have to do. Whereas to cash a check, you have to show ID. To come to the legislature and see us do our job, you got to have ID when you come through security. Get on a plane, you got to have ID. Pretty much everything we do in our lives nowadays, you have to have ID.
But let me backtrack a little bit and share with you why voter integrity matters to me so much. And I want to share with you a story of what happened to me in the year 2000. You may remember the Bush-Gore election and the hanging chads and what happened in Florida. Well, what happened to me in my personal experience was that I went to vote in my Middletown precinct, and I had a Bush button on. I probably shouldn't have, but I didn't know anything about politics then. And I had my Bush button on, and I went in and I voted, and as I was coming out, another woman was coming in. And she said to me, "You have to thank me." And I said, "Oh, really? Why?" She said, "Because I voted twice for Bush." And I said, "Really?" She said, "I have a vacation home in Florida. I filled out an absentee ballot, and now I'm voting again." And I looked at her and I said, "You mean you're cheating?" And that experience stuck with me, because when the whole turmoil happened of the election and the hanging chads and all of that mess that was the 2000 election, the presidential election, that experience never escaped me. And although I was a Bush supporter at the time, it really upset me that somebody was cheating, that somebody had cheated. And then it occurred to me how many other people in Florida had cheated, and were the results of that election the true results that should have been what happened, and not just Florida, but other states as well. So that spurred it within me. So backtrack, fast forward a few years, and now I'm in the state legislature, and I presented this bill last year, and it met with really a dead response. And I daily asked, "Where's the bill? Can we at least vote on the bill?" The bill never came out. So, and basically what happens is, in my bill, the Department of Motor Vehicles downloads your driver's license information to the voting poll. So when you go in the state of Maryland and they have the voter roll and they look at their sheet of paper, they can do this on a computer, or they can do it in their books. Your information, your driver's license information, will be already there. So there is no disenfranchisement. Nobody has to produce a driver's license. Their information is there waiting for them when they get to the poll. Now, for that 0.10 of 1%, and it is proven nationwide that it is only really 1/10 of 1% of people that do not have a driver's license or some form of government-issued ID, those people can still vote. They should bring some kind of identifying documentation, either a utility bill, a voter ID card, their specimen ballot. They can vote by provisional ballot if they cannot produce those things, so nobody is disenfranchised. And one additional point, national polls say that over 70% of Americans of all racial, socioeconomic, religious backgrounds believe that voter ID is part and parcel to fraud-free elections.
Other issues. And I have to just remind everyone that the Supreme Court did rule that shoring up these votes and the integrity of votes is very important, since we have so many cases now documented of fraud across the country and in Maryland. And so this is legitimate. People will argue, oh, it's going back to Jim Crow laws. No, as Delegate Afzali said, it's very easy to get identification and even to have a sample ballot, for gosh sakes. It's very easy to do this. The Supreme Court did not agree with that argument. Acorn, as you know, is very much against this. There were 80,000 illegal immigrants voted in the Chicago election, and they were found, 80,000 were found out. How many more were there? We don't know. So I mean, there's this kind of thing does go on, and I think we have to admit it goes on. The argument on my committee is always that we have no proof of it going on here, but it's because no one's looking. And if you talk to the election board, and I deal with them often being on those commissions, someone is not removed from the voter scrolls unless that person asks to be removed. So if somebody moves away, they could still be in 2 states. My daughter and son-in-law were complaining that they got voter sample ballots down in North Carolina. They've lived there for 5 years. And they're still registered to vote here, and they're registered to vote down there, despite their letting them know up here that they were moving out of state. So we do need if we're not going to purge the scrolls, people we've known passed away or whatever, let's at least have voter ID. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. This is a no-brainer issue, and as far as the rationale that, well, we don't have a voter fraud problem in Maryland, Delegate George is absolutely right. When you're not looking, you're not going to find it. And why wait till we have a problem? Why not just go ahead and be sure that the vote is secure and that people, everybody's vote should count, that is allowed to vote, and it should count one time.
About a year ago, I was very heavily impressed by Anita Moncrief, whose name some of you may know. Anita was a whistleblower for Acorn, and she came forward before the 2008 elections and made known the fact that there was voter fraud being perpetrated by Acorn. No one listened to her publicly, I guess, before the election, but afterward her story picked up steam. I was so impressed by her when she mentioned that there was going to be a national summit in Houston, Texas, that very moment I said, I'm going to be there. And what the summit was a group of 27 states represented by 300 and some odd people that were interested in finding out how to clean up the voter fraud that they were experiencing. They themselves in Texas had uncovered voter fraud to such an extent that they took it upon themselves to legally go through the voter registrations and identify where there were problems. They didn't have a software system to do this. They did it manually. They compiled all of their data. They planned a press conference. They announced when the press conference would be, and what do you know? All of their data was destroyed in a fire 4 hours before the press conference. Sad but true. That didn't stop them. They continued, and they pressed on, and they created a software program that we use now at Election Integrity Maryland. And that brings us to why we're here today. I have in my hand our first set of challenges that we're going to be delivering to the State Board of Elections today. It's a sampling of 7,000 voter registrations that we have looked at. Of those 7,000, 5,400 show irregularities that could lead to voter fraud. And what kind of irregularities did we find? We found, among other things, duplicate voter IDs. We found bad addresses. We found evidence of people who have been on the inactive status for way more than 2 presidential election cycles. The scariest thing that we found was hundreds of people that are dead and have been dead for up to 15 years that are still active on the voter rolls. We have this data compiled that we are turning over to the State Board of Elections today, not to point fingers, but it's their job to clean the voter rolls. That's the one job that they have, is to provide Maryland citizens with free and fair elections. And if they can't do it alone, we're going to help them. We're a group that's dedicated to free and fair elections. We take our work very, very seriously. We have approximately 17 active people doing database work right now. It's our goal to have researchers in every county in the state of Maryland. We're also doing poll watcher training. It's come to our attention that there is no training course that's given to poll watchers in our polling places. In fact, I've had chief judges approach me after our training class and suggest that as a judge for many years, he had no idea what the relationship was between the poll watchers and the integrity of the election process. We have a 2.5-hour course that we teach. We travel all over the state doing that, and it's our responsibility, our goal, and our mission to make sure that elections in Maryland remain fair and free, now and into the future.
You know, hearing the stories and listening to this, it makes me mindful that there's a bottle of Sudafed on this table over here that just so happens that someone has a cold and they pulled out. And we value whether or not you can go to the CVS or the drugstore and buy Sudafed. You're required to show photo ID. But in this country, where we elect representatives who decide whether or not we're going to go to war or not, whether or not we're going to send American blood to war, to live and fight and die for our country, people are voting in those elections fraudulently and making those decisions for us. And within sight of the American flag that we're standing next to, in the spirit of America, in the idea that men pledged their life and liberty for the pursuit of freedom, for the pursuit of happiness, for all the things that we value, we as America have to have elections that are just as honorable and just as honest as in our counterpart free countries around the world. So I want to encourage all Marylanders to get involved in this mission. Election Integrity Maryland, which I can't stress more. I've met Democrats and Republicans that belong to this organization. Their website is electionintegritymaryland.com. You can go to that website, sign up for a class to become a poll watcher, sign up to be one of the individuals who scrutinizes the voter rolls that our state and our country is failing to do, so that we are sure that American elections here in Maryland are free and honest. And with that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you all for being here today. God bless America.